I'm an Apple fan. In my house, it's Apple, 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 Apple. But I'm also a serious photo nerd, and millions of people come to my website, like you, to read my camera and lens reviews. So as soon as I got my hands on iPhone 6 Plus, I began comparing it to iPhone 5S and the iSight camera in it. Now, I put both of these side-by-side tests through thousands and thousands of different photos, from candid shooting with the kids to just see how it worked in the real world, to taking it into the image testing lab with high-end solutions to see exactly what the sensor is doing and if the specs that we were promised are actually going to produce better photos in the real world. One thing that we noticed in our lab testing is the iPhone 6 Plus images have a lot less contrast than the iPhone 5S. So we took the cameras out into the real world to do a lot of different shoots in different situations to see what that really looks like. This is probably the best way to see it is in this example where we have sand. This is the iPhone 6 Plus, and that's the iPhone 5S. The iPhone 5S photo is much more contrasty. Now, while there's an argument for making the sand look nice and bright and clean, the truth is the scene was just contrasty. It was the morning light and a lot of shadows there. But the iPhone 6 Plus makes it look grayed out. And you can really see that on a portrait. Now, it's very difficult with camera phones to compare apples to apples to get a perfect, exact replica of what each camera can do. But we took a lot of different photos, and this example is pretty representative of what we saw overall. This is shot with the iPhone 6 Plus. Now look at the cheeks here, and you can see that it's very blotchy. It just doesn't have natural gradients in the skin tones. Compared to the iPhone 5S, the older camera, the skin tones look much, much more natural. And that contrast is normal because there is contrast in the face. Here where it's grayed out, there's a very tiny difference between hues and tones, and so it ends up looking a little bit blotchy because it's, made into a JPEG. With higher dynamic range, you can also see it. This is the iPhone 5S. Look at the foreground. Compared to the iPhone 6, it's much less contrast, much more grayed out. Now, it's nice to be able to get that dynamic range, but if you just take an iPhone 5S photo and you just reduce the contrast just slightly, you get this. And you see it's just about identical foreground to the iPhone 6 Plus. So it's just an iPhone 5S photo that's less contrasty, and as we have seen from a lot of different examples, that's not a good thing, and it's a big miss in the iPhone 6 Plus camera. Another problem that I found with iPhone 6 Plus is that there's a reduced rate in the burst rate, not when you hold down your finger and get the super fast burst rate, but when you just press wanting to take multiple photos at once, much like you do with the portrait when the kids are running around, you're just kind of pressing. What I found is iPhone 5S could actually shoot about twice as many photos as iPhone 6 Plus in that situation. But in low light, iPhone 6 Plus kicked the 5S's butt. Let's take a look at it. So this photo is taken with iPhone 6 Plus, and we taped a newspaper to the wall so that we could judge the sharpness as well. Look at just the wall. You can see the texturing on the wall. You can even read the letters. But on 5S, it's a mess. There's no detail and the wall looks horrible. Now this is an interesting thing because we want to see how they did this, because it's really the same sensor that has now phase detection autofocus points on it. So I was curious why we were seeing the improvement in low light, and this is it. With the 5S, we are shooting at ISO 2500 at 1/15 of a second in this situation. That's just what the camera app chose. On iPhone 6 Plus, they have artificially limited the noise to ISO 500, so a lower ISO, but they've slowed the shutter down because now we have optical image stabilization and we can drop that shutter speed just a little bit, resulting in a much better picture in a very dark condition. Now, coincidentally, when I tested this in a little bit more reasonable conditions, not quite this dark, the results were a lot tighter, but still iPhone 6 Plus gets a big benefit for how it handles noise and low light situations, even with the same sensor. Without question, the biggest change we saw in the iPhone 6 Plus camera is with focus. phase detection autofocus on the sensor is an awesome feature. So we tested it in a lot of different ways. First, we went outside with a lot of very fast action to see if the camera could track movement. And what we found is the iPhone 5S and the 6 Plus both performed very, very well. When you're outside, you have more depth of field because of a slightly stopped down aperture, and there's so much contrast that it's easy for any camera to focus. So we took it inside and tried some just candid photos as most people would be using the camera, and we did find a little bit of an improvement with the 6 Plus. About 10% of the photos were proper focus on the 6 Plus that the iPhone 5S had missed. We saw a huge difference though when we really pushed the autofocus to see what the cameras could do in an extremely dark environment. We found the iPhone 6 Plus still focused about 90% of the time and a reasonable amount of focus and quickness, and the iPhone 5S very rarely did in that very dark environment. So if you're really pushing your iPhone to the limits, or you're shooting in dark areas often, then the iPhone 6 Plus will produce much sharper photos because of the better focus. When it comes right down to it, iPhone 6 Plus is a great phone. It's a decent camera, and I do like the improvements that we've seen with optical image stabilization, so you can get a slightly slower shutter speed, but the big one is the improvement in the focus. However, it's not the huge change in cameras that we were all hoping for. Really, it's an incremental improvement. It makes very slightly better pictures when you're really pushing the limits of your camera. For day-to-day use, you're not going to see a whole lot of difference in the camera. And unless you're kind of a photo nerd, you won't tell any difference in the camera other than that reduction in contrast, which is kind of a negative. For the full review, there are tons more tests that we didn't mention in this video. Go to improvephotography.com/iPhone 6 and we'll have the full breakdown right there.